The greatness of the Imperium of man is often measured in gold and towering monuments, a glorious illusion, concealing the grandest abattoir the galaxy has ever witnessed. Welcome to the truth. Welcome to Golgotha Prime. Here, beneath 10,000 tons of reinforced concrete, the light of the sun is a blasphemous concept. Billions of souls exist not to live, but to serve as cogs in an infinitely starving machine. There is no time for pity. The collapse of an individual is merely a clinical statistic. The weak are granted no rest. Their very existence is recycled to sustain those still standing. This is the genesis of Corpse-starch, the standard ration for billions, compressed from the ashes of their fallen neighbors. The cycle of life and death reduced to a ruthless mathematical equation. Yet the true cruelty does not lie within the biorecycling plants. It lies here, the nervous system of the Administratum, where the edicts of fate are decreed. Adept Prime Veritas, a biological entity objectified. His blind eyes symbolize the very operation of the Imperium, unforgiving, unfeeling. The Imperial Tithe. It is a concept, a law, an invisible god before which every world must kneel. The Imperium does not demand currency. Wealth holds no meaning in a universe consumed by war. The Imperium demands iron, weapons, and above all, the tithe of souls. A tribute of crimson must be offered every solar year. Stripped of identity, they become the fuel for a war of attrition across the stars. Leaving behind their families and the polluted skies of their homeworld, they embrace the ultimate martyrdom to keep the imperial machine from collapsing. Without the tithe of souls, humanity's defensive lines would shatter. But fulfilling this invisible quota is a slow, agonizing death sentence. And the machine never stops demanding. A machine can run for millennia, but the biological remnants of Adept Veritas are decaying. Fatigue is a flaw the Imperium refuses to acknowledge. It is not a grand betrayal or a heretical uprising. The doom of billions is sealed by a mere twitch of an exhausted muscle. A cataclysmic clerical error. The algorithm accepts the input. The starvation edict is mathematically validated and instantly unleashed upon Golgotha Prime. The entire nutritional reserve of the Hive World is forcefully requisitioned. The system demands that the tithe must be paid in full. They are draining the very lifeblood of the planet. And where is this monumental harvest destined? The starving masses watch their salvation ascend into the heavens, powerless against the bureaucratic machinery. The destination is a front line erased from the galactic record 4 centuries ago. A dead world, populated only by ghosts and dust. Millions will starve so that a dead front can be supplied with rations. The ultimate mathematical suicide. On Golgotha Prime, the countdown to collapse begins not with a bomb, but with the silence of empty silos. The hunger takes hold. It is not a sudden pang, but a creeping, agonizing bioalchemy that devours the mind. Order is a fragile construct, sustained only by the promise of the next meal. When the promise is broken, the beast awakens. The rulers of the hive do not offer salvation. They offer only the brutal geometry of shield and baton. They hurl themselves into the meat grinder. To die fighting is preferable to the slow rot of starvation. Morality evaporates. In the darkest depths, they turn to the ultimate taboo. Survival becomes a surgical desecration of their own humanity. Without fuel, the engines die. Without food, the workforce perishes. The planetary output drops to zero. To the Administratum, there is no famine. There is only a failure to meet the Imperial Tithe. The system does not recognize its own error. The machine is infallible. Therefore, the planet must be at fault. A world that does not pay its tithe is a world in rebellion. And rebellion is met with only one response. The tragic cycle is complete. They were starved by a mistake, and now they will be erased from the galactic record for the crime of starving. The machine churns on, deaf to the screams, blind to the tragedy, forever hungry. The Imperium does not forgive. When a world fails to feed the machine feeds upon the world. Salvation was expected. Instead, the skies darkened with the cold geometry of mathematical annihilation. For the starved masses, the end does not come with a whisper, but with the roaring engines of divine judgment, a surgical desecration of an entire ecosystem. Billions of souls reduced to a singular target reticle. The purge is clinical. Millions are erased from the galactic record in a fraction of a microsecond. Armor and authority offer no sanctuary. All are equalized under the crushing weight of bureaucratic kinetic fury. They spilled their genetic vitae not for glory, but as a final, pathetic tribute to an indifferent algorithm. There is no martyrdom here, only the systematic dismantling of biological efficiency. To the Administratum, genocide is not a tragedy. It is merely a rapid structural recalibration of a deficient asset. The mathematical sacrifice is accepted. Golgotha Prime is successfully neutralized. A world burns, and the only reaction is the turning of a page. The ultimate nihilistic void. Even the false idols weep, not in sorrow, but melting under the sheer heat of imperial dogma. The abattoir is finally closed. The meat grinder has consumed itself, leaving nothing but silence and radioactive dust. Adept Prime Veritas registers the event. A mere footnote in the eternal ledger of the 41st Millennium. The ledger is balanced. The deficit has been paid, with the lives of the innocent. Trillions of lived experiences, memories, and suffering, erased with a single, indifferent stroke. And the cycle immediately restarts. The ashes of the dead are already being processed into the bureaucracy of tomorrow. There is no lesson learned. There is only the eternal hunger of a dying empire. The machinery of the Administratum grinds on, a cathedral of paperwork built upon a foundation of skulls. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is no hope. There is only the math, and the math always demands its tithe. Golgotha Prime is dead. The silence of the grave descends upon a world that once housed billions. But in the Imperium, even the dead are not exempt from duty. The abattoir has finished its work, but the slaughter is only the first stage of a far more blasphemous logistics network. The remains of the fallen, the atomized ash of 1 trillion citizens, are forcefully extracted from their resting place, a surgical desecration of the deceased. The system does not see mourning families or tragic ends. It only sees raw, unrefined carbon. Through agonizing bioalchemy, the essence of Golgotha Prime is transformed. The victims of the bureaucratic error are liquefied and repurposed. They are flattened, bleached, pressed into miles of smooth, sickeningly pale material. The tragic irony of the Imperium is fully realized. The flesh of the slaughtered is converted into the very vellum used to write their death warrants, a tribute of crimson and ash, exported back to the heart of the decaying empire. The meat grinder operates with perfect, zero-waste efficiency. The universe is vast, but it is entirely choked by the sheer mass of imperial paperwork. Adept Prime Veritas awaits the next data stream. His mind is a hollow vessel, an instrument of cataclysmic authority stripped of empathy. He touches the surface of Golgotha Prime. He runs his fingers over the processed remains of the very souls he erased from the galactic record. Yet the machine knows no guilt. The Administratum does not pause to reflect on its own horrific geometry. Veritas is not an anomaly. He is one of millions, a chorus of mathematical suicide, dictating the fate of the stars from a lightless tomb. The Imperium of Man claims to protect humanity, but humanity is merely the fuel. A rotting, bloated leviathan that must consume its own organs just to survive another solar day. A misplaced decimal, a delayed transport, a fatigue-induced tremor. Any of these will feed the next system-wide starvation. The ultimate futility of existence. They are born into a universe of war, only to be crushed by the logistics of their own supposed salvation. The Emperor sits upon his golden throne, a silent, rotting god presiding over a galaxy of endless, meaningless sacrifice. The tithe is eternal, and the ledger is never truly balanced. 1,000 light years from the silent grave of their homeworld, the tribute of crimson arrives at its destination. There are no grand speeches, no banners of glory, only the clinical deployment of biological assets into the meat grinder. This is a war of attrition, a mathematical equation where the only variable is the sheer volume of flesh thrown into the abyss. He does not know his homeworld has been erased from the galactic record. He only knows the cold weight of his laser gun. The weapon in his hands was forged by the very starvation that doomed his people. The tragic circle of the Imperial Tithe is perfectly closed. They are ordered to hold a line that has not moved a single inch in 3 centuries. The algorithm dictates an offensive. The hour of their ultimate martyrdom has arrived. The whistle blows. The mathematical suicide begins. They charge into the void, not as heroes, but as a calculated expenditure of the Administratum's vast reserves. Thousands are reduced to atomized ash in the blink of an eye. Their existence cancelled by a higher caliber of mathematics. He spills his genetic vitae. A quiet, insignificant end to a life that belonged entirely to the Emperor. There is no mourning. The geometry of the charge must be maintained. The flesh bridges the gaps for the armor to follow. The attrition rate perfectly matches the projections calculated by the High Lords of Terra. Even in the chaotic heart of the abattoir, the bureaucracy is present. Every loss must be documented. The clinical verification of a surgical desecration. His duty is officially concluded. The data packet of his demise is encrypted and transmitted across the stars, traveling faster than the speed of human grief. A solitary ping on a terminal. The final echo of Unit Gamma 9 reaching the hollow halls of the Administratum. Adept Prime Veritas registers the expenditure. The ledger updates with flawless, horrifying precision. The machine notes the deficit. The machine demands a replacement. And so, somewhere in the galaxy, another planetary governor will receive a quota. The eternal engine of the Imperium grinds ever onward. Far from the bleeding frontiers, the heart of the Imperium beats with a cold, metallic rhythm. Here, billions of lives are weighed in ounces of gold. The High Lords of Terra. 12 individuals burdened with the survival of 1,000,000 worlds. Their decrees shape the galaxy. To stand before them is to stand before the architects of existence. Governors beg for relief, for time, for mercy. But mercy is a resource the Imperium exhausted millennia ago. The machine only understands quotas, a single keystroke, a structural recalibration of an entire subsector. The governor's plea is mathematically dismissed. Failure is a heresy that the logic engines cannot tolerate. The deficient must be systematically dismantled to preserve the whole. The gaze of the High Lords never lingers on a single tragedy. Their vision is locked on the macro-logistics of an eternal war. A new variable is selected. The algorithm identifies a world capable of fulfilling the newly created deficit. The burden is simply shifted. The mathematical sacrifice of one world becomes the inevitable doom of another. The decree flows downwards, a toxic waterfall of bureaucracy seeping into the deepest vaults of Terra. The Departamento Unitorum, the colossal abattoir where human lives are converted into logistical data points. 1 billion new conscripts demanded, trillions of tons of raw material requisitioned. The machine hums with kinetic fury. The paperwork of genocide is manufactured with the precision of a venerated sacrament. To transmit these orders across the stars requires an agonizing bioalchemy of the human mind. The astropaths hurl the bureaucratic mandates into the abyss, their sanity slowly drained of biological efficiency with every transmission. Another mind burns out, embraced by the ultimate martyrdom, just to send a requisition form. The command speeds through the darkness of the galaxy, an invisible bullet aimed at the heart of an unsuspecting world, a world that currently knows peace, a world that believes the Emperor's light protects them. The illusion of safety is shattered the moment the machine demands its due. The cycle begins anew. a cataclysmic demand that will inevitably lead to starvation, rebellion, and total planetary purgation. Peace is merely a temporary deficit in the Imperium's ledgers, a fleeting illusion before the mathematical meat grinder demands its due. A single sheet of repurposed human skin vellum carries enough bureaucratic weight to crush a paradise into oblivion. To satisfy the High Lords of Terra, the harvest must become a surgical desecration of nature itself. Flesh is merely another resource to be systematically dismantled. They are drained of biological efficiency for a war they cannot see. They spill their genetic vitae into the very grain they harvest, a sacrament of suffering baked into the daily rations. The agonizing bioalchemy of imperial logistics transforms a thriving biosphere into a suffocating tomb of ash and toil. The wealth of a world is violently extracted, a tribute of sustenance fed into the gaping maw of an eternal crusade. No amount of sacrifice is ever enough. The dogma of the Administratum ensures that the mathematical target is always just out of reach. Stripped of their harvest, the desperate masses embrace the ultimate martyrdom. Rebellion is born from the absolute certainty of starvation. To question the tithe is the ultimate heresy. The system responds to hunger with absolute kinetic fury. Every plea for mercy is ground into the dirt. The abattoir does not negotiate with the livestock. A bread riot is mathematically translated as planetary treason. The logic engines demand immediate cataclysmic sanitization. The cycle of destruction is perfectly synchronized. The hammer of the Inquisition falls upon the innocent and the guilty alike, reduced to atomized ash in a singular, blinding moment. Another ledger balanced through absolute annihilation. The bureaucratic decree survives just long enough to witness the total erasure of its victims from the galactic record. A dead world is not a tragedy. It is merely a fresh quarry. The raw materials for tomorrow's paperwork await extraction. The cyclical, surgical desecration continues. The ashes of Ceres Minor will soon bind the condemnations of 1,000 other worlds. Adept Prime Veritas feels nothing. He simply updates the math. The void left by one obliterated planet must be immediately filled by another. The venerable sacrament of logistics is eternal. The blood of the fallen lubricates the gears of their own oblivion. The meat grinder never jams. It merely shifts its immense, suffocating weight to crush the next fleeting spark of hope. There is no grand finale, no heroic revelation, only the endless, rhythmic scratching of the eternal ledger. A river of condemnations flows outwards, carrying the weight of 1,000,000 cataclysmic errors built upon a foundation of pulverized bone. Holy Terra, the beating heart of the Imperium. A colossal, decaying monument to the futility of human existence. The skies weep black tears as the galaxy's wealth is funneled into the gaping maw of the ultimate abattoir. They feed the homeworld with the ashes of the stars. The meat grinder operates with terrifying, relentless perfection. And at the center of it all, a rotting god sits upon a golden throne, anchoring a blasphemous empire of mathematical suicide. A calculation ends. 1 billion souls are erased from the galactic record, and the next calculation immediately begins. The architects of this suffering are prisoners of their own machine, caught in a war of attrition against their own humanity. In the grim darkness of the 41st Millennium, there is no peace amongst the stars. There is only the eternal meat grinder. The math is absolute, and the universe is entirely devoid of mercy.